Hello. Long time no talk. I coming into this, and I'm going to be entirely honest, I don't know exactly what I'm going to talk about right now, but I've got a couple of ideas. So let's start with RFK Jr.'s moves around the COVID vaccine. So as of today, August 27th, he has tweeted that he will be removing the emergency use authorization for the COVID-19 vaccines. Interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure that they were no longer emergency use. He said that people can still get them if they're still recommended for high-risk populations. So that's the extremely old, the extremely young, and people with conditions. Then he also said, if you want it, you can get it. You just have to talk to your physician first. Now, seems to be a little bit anti-medical choice, which is kind of weird because I feel like they really sort of ran on that, sort of like the thing of letting you choose how you manage your own health and your own life. But if there's one thing that Republicans have been since the dawn of time, it's people who say they're all about small government, and then they get in and they are just big government. The only difference is, see, they don't want big government to help you, the individual. They want big government to help corporations, to help the wealthy, and to help impose their will upon you, the people, me, the people, us, generally, the people. And so that's sort of what they do. So this is not necessarily unexpected. Now, we also know that he recently appointed a vocal COVID critic to be in charge of re-examining the COVID vaccine authorization panel. And so almost certainly the recommendations will get more restrictive. And I want to point something out about sort of limiting the ease of access to people getting the vaccine. And more than that, the sort of environment around that, which is that if the government doesn't recommend it, then will insurance companies pay for it? How many doses will the companies make? Which means, will there be enough for you to get one if you want one? And you get an appointment with your doctor in time. Will your doctor just do it over the phone? What are the actual requirements about getting one? Do you need a doctor's note, or you just say you went to the doctor? We don't know because they don't plan. But I want to get to the core of an issue about this. It's pretty obvious that RFK wants you and me to be sick. That's what happens when people don't get vaccines for things that we have vaccines for. They get sick. Because he's under some delusion that the vaccines are actually worse than getting COVID, and we know that's not true. There was a study that was put out by people in his sphere of influence that claimed your chances of hospitalization from the vaccine were higher than your chances of hospitalization from COVID, which was riddled with statistical faux pas and, I don't want to say data manipulation, but it was pretty manipulated. And I'll give you one example. Now, in this study they often cite, what they did was they looked at a group of people who had the vaccine, and then they looked at people who got COVID. Now, for every adverse effect you might have from the vaccine, which there will be some, things like a rash or swelling, heart palpitations, things just that happen because what the vaccine does is it stimulates your immune system. So you occasionally, depending on how your immune system would have reacted, get some symptoms of the disease without actually having it, because your body fights the disease, and some of those symptoms actually come from the body fighting the virus. So what they did was they looked at the people who got COVID and went to the hospital, and they looked at the vaccine effects that are considered adverse. Now, when they were sort of tallying up both columns, what they did was, if you went to the hospital for COVID, you were counted as one instance of a person going to a hospital for COVID. For the adverse effects, what they actually did was they counted the number of adverse effects you had. So if you were a person who hadn't had the vaccine, you went to the hospital with COVID, you were counted as one. Didn't matter if you had breathing symptoms, blood pressure symptoms, doesn't matter if you had a fever. All of those symptoms get rolled into a count of one. But if you look at the adverse reactions, if you've got a fever and you've got breathing problems and you've got blood pressure problems, that is 3 over here for the vaccine and 1 over here for a person with actual COVID. So they didn't look at the symptoms that put that person with COVID into the hospital. They just counted as one. So their numbers were higher. They also selectively included and excluded things with minimal rationale. There's some rationale for some of what they did, but for other things, they just sort of winged it. So the study was flawed. But they'll use that as justification. Now, on that same note, RFK is planning, as he said previously, to put out the report on the causes of autism in September, so next month. And looking forward to seeing how much bullshit he can pack into that report. I'm going to hate reading through it because I'm sure, much like any time I watch Trump speak, I'm just going to keep seeing lies and misstatements and inaccuracies and just bullshit, and I'm going to keep getting angry every time it happens. But I'm going to read through it, and I'm going to tell you what they're saying and most likely why they're wrong. If they're right about things, I'll certainly tell you they're right about things. I have no qualms about that. But knowing the track record of what he's done so far, I don't really think that's going to be the issue. Hey, sorry to interrupt me. If you'll notice, I'm wearing a different shirt. That's because this was filmed on a different day. So I wanted to break in to add some more information. I recorded the main part of this video on Wednesday afternoon, and by Wednesday night, we had a whole unfolding situation at the CDC that I feel like it's important to add here. So when I made the video previously about leadership positions at HHS, one of the people, I think probably the only one who I said was a good choice, was Dr. Susan Monterez as the head of CDC. So she got confirmed back at the end of July and hadn't even been on the job for a month before RFK decided to get rid of her. She made him fire her. Well, he couldn't fire her. She made the White House fire her. Dr. Monterez did not want to go along with RFK's position on vaccines, his incorrect, false position on vaccines. And so she was ousted. She also wouldn't fire other top leaders at CDC. Now, in response, 4 other figures, pretty substantial standing at CDC, also issued their resignation. So there's Deborah Oury. She was the chief medical officer and deputy director for program and science at the CDC. You have Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis. He was the director for the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the CDC. You have Dr. Daniel Jernigan, and Dr. Jernigan was the director of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. And you also had Dr. Jennifer Layden. She was the director of the Office of Public Health Data Science and Tech at the CDC. Now, interestingly, all of these people cited a pressure around ACIP. And we talked about ACIP before, but the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. So a while back, RFK fired everybody, put on a bunch of unqualified people and one qualified person, and did this so that they can push lies and conspiracies about vaccines. And they are going to look at the COVID vaccine. They've already done some restriction, as I just talked about. But the resignation letters for these 4 individuals, and from what we've heard from Dr. Monterez's attorneys, paints a pretty stark picture of the fact that RFK intends to manipulate or fabricate data in order to push the narrative that he wants to push, and that these people were not willing to go along with it. Now, in response to the firing and the resignations, a bunch of lower-level CDC people all staged a walkout on Thursday, and I believe into Friday. So this is a situation that is developing. Now, I think we're at a part, where it is right for these people to leave. I know, and they know, that they have a responsibility to the public, but at this point, the public doesn't want them to do their job. They voted for them to not get to do their jobs, and so the public might need to understand what exactly it was they voted for. And I fully support the walkout. I fully support them leaving that situation, because we can't ask them, those of us who trust science when we see it, and those of us who understand the importance of scientific advancement, we can't expect them to stay and act in contradiction to their morals. We wouldn't ask that of ourselves, and we shouldn't ask that of them. So I fully support the resignations. I fully support everyone at the CDC quitting. Hollow the agency out, because what RFK wants is these people to bend to his will, to imply some legitimacy to his actions. And if there's no one there, he can't do that. And I think it's pretty stark if an entire agency hollows itself out when you're in charge, that you're a fucking piece of shit. And I hope that this leads to some consequences for him. Do I think they have enough to remove him from position? No. Can they make it uncomfortable for him? Probably. And that needs to happen. Now, I will let you get back to the rest of the video. I just thought it was important that I bring that information in context because it's relevant. So back to me. So that's RFK's bullshit. And again, they're tier list. They're like tier list makers for things, you know. And they have one for the Trump cabinet. And I consistently would rank RFK pretty high because of the long-term damage he's doing. Because when you diminish or demolish capabilities in scientific research and development, you don't just lose something that can be started up again later. You lose a lot of things that can't be started up later or not as easily, which means you're setting yourself back much further than something else that you just turn off or on. So for me, RFK lands towards the top, but then again, I do have a personal attachment to science, being a scientist. Now, let's talk about the deployments of the National Guard. First in DC, and I will say that the laws around DC, which is not a state and is a federal district, makes it very different what he's doing there with the National Guard and his ability to do those things and to interact with that city the way he is. That's just the state in which DC exists. And I don't mean state like an actual state. I mean state generally. The next threats came for Chicago. Now, Pritzker had a barn burner of a speech about this, where he rattled off crime statistics and how Chicago was trending down and doing very well in decreasing the amount of crime, both violent and otherwise. And he did that part of it to sort of provide the rationale for the eventual court case about how there is not an emergency and how he did not ask for help. He also lobbed some solid digs at Trump, which we all appreciate. And said something that I really did find refreshing. It was a warning to people in the federal government that their actions would not go without consequence. That they would be watching, they would be taking notes, and when power shifted, there would be consequences. And I think even more what was implied was that there would also be state consequences for actions that were blatantly illegal. I got that vibe. I won't say he said it, but it is sort of how I felt seeing it. And I think the subtext was there enough that I'm fine to say it. And I think that's a solid response. It's really all he can do at the moment. People at the conference had asked him if he would file preemptive legal cases to stop it from happening, but he really can't do that because until he knows what the written reason is and has the justification written out, you can't really challenge that legally because he could take it to court, but court can't issue anything about a thing that hasn't happened yet. It's just not how that works in most cases. Sometimes you can have preliminary injunctions to stop things from happening, but even in this instance, he would have to have some sort of written record of the thing so that they could state their legal case on why it shouldn't happen. In response, Trump said that he can do whatever he wants because he's the president, so long as it pertains to national security. Now, he gets this idea from John fucking Roberts and his shitheel of a court, because they've used this justification to shield him before and will likely do so again. Trump has mentioned now twice in 2 days about dictators, how he doesn't want to be one, how people are saying they might need one. And this is the same bullshit he always does, where he floats something and then he tries to do it. And I know there's a lot of fear around that. But I don't know how concerning the idea is. For a couple of reasons. One, America is quite large. Geographically, we are a very large country. We have a standing army, but not nearly enough of a standing army to actively police the whole country. And what's more, Trump isn't popular. So in almost all dictatorships that have sort of cropped up in any authoritarian regime, you've needed one or two things specifically. You needed either the fierce loyalty of the military, because what you're asking them to do is to oppress their neighbors, which usually doesn't go over well, or two, you need to be very popular so that most of the country, most of the region will go along with you for the first bit. And once you've sort of hemmed in that authoritarian power, once you've sort of made yourself strong, you don't necessarily need that same popular support because you can manufacture it. You can scare people into supporting you. And right now, Trump doesn't have either of those things. He is not popular, except with his bullshit base that he's always been popular with. The fucking mouth-breathing knuckle draggers who fucking worship the man for some reason. And so you don't have to worry about that one. And the military, they've purged a lot of people higher up, but with that, you lose competence and you just have sycophants. Now, even then, there's no saying whether or not these people who took their oath to the Constitution, not the man, would resist those orders, but I don't think it's going to be so easy. At the same time, if you had the same misfortune as I did to actually watch Trump in any of his recent appearances this week in the Oval Office or in the cabinet meeting, you will find that he is greatly diminished. You will find that this man seems weaker, older, slower than he already did. He seems more sleepy. You will find that he's making gaffes that are even larger than the ones he normally makes. But a lot of what makes him seem less old to people who don't pay enough attention is that he talks at a decent cadence and just keeps fucking talking. But he's slowing down. He's got a mysterious bruise on his hand that looks like it could be from an IV. He's got massively swollen ankles. He is talking about how he just wants to get into heaven. Listen, he's diminished, to say the least. And I think what we could guess, if I had to, was that while J.D. Vance may be more competent, J.D. Vance cannot hold on to Trump's cult. He doesn't have that personality. He seems like a dork all of the time. And he's already been memed to death in such a way that I don't think he has the machismo to take over the mantle. People won't be afraid of him because he won't command the cult in the same way. And because of that, I don't think he'll be an effective replacement. And I don't think they have an effective replacement because Trump has essentially smothered in the crib everyone who could have been a successor because he doesn't like to share power or attention. So, when the man eventually, as we all must, shuffles off the mortal coil, there'll be a power vacuum, and no one who is charismatic enough to fill it, and they will fall into disarray. I am of the firm belief that this pendulum will swing back. I'm of the firm belief the cowardice we're seeing now will shift. I think that there is will in the people to not be ruled. Now, his cult base will do what they always do, but at the end of the day, that's 33-ish% of voters. That's 33-ish% of voters in the US. Around that percentage, around a third of voters, which voters are like what, half-ish, a little under half of the US population, which means people who aren't normally engaged or involved will be when things start to turn south. And there's still some pretense of them following rules, which is good because it means that they think they have to. Now, recently, Trump had theoretically fired one of the governors of the Federal Reserve Board, but she said, no, you can't do that, and I'm not leaving. And interestingly, when the Supreme Court said that Trump could fire a lot of government employees, they also said, but you couldn't do that for the Fed. So now we'll have to see exactly where their loyalties lie. Does the Supreme Court, when this challenge gets there, listen to their previous ruling, or do they make a new one to carve out for this? But keep in mind, the Fed is one of the reasons that our economy can remain so stable even under all the tariff bullshit. Because the Fed is independent. And smart people realize this. This is why Trump doesn't realize this. And so what will the Supreme Court do? Anybody's game, but I feel like since they specifically called out the Fed in their stupid fucking ruling from before, they are probably willing to defend it again. Okay, two more things. One, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was released from custody, but then brought back into ICE custody, where they intend to now deport him to Uganda. And I do think that would be legal. Unfortunately, that's the system. They fucked up, and where they fucked up the first time was sending him to El Salvador, where they had specific orders not to. So they could theoretically send him to Uganda, I believe. The kicker here is that I think they had offered, if he pled guilty to the human trafficking charges, to send him to Costa Rica instead, but he refused. So they want him to be guilty, but they'll just make him go away. And so it's, to be clear, it was always worth the fight. And how it plays out now is kind of within the bounds of the law. It might be morally objectionable, but it's the system we've framed up that we're willing to live with. That's one thing. Second thing, if you, like me, had the misfortune of watching a cabinet meeting, you just watched people debase themselves for this fucking lunatic for north of an hour, always talking about how great he is and how wonderful he is and how no one else could have done what he does, and everything's perfect now under Trump. And it's all bullshit. These people go in there and they sell their morals and their fucking self-respect for power, and they treat him like he's a fucking toddler who they're telling how good his fucking finger painting is, because they want control of things. People use him like a goddamn finger puppet, and he's too fucking stupid to understand it because he just wants praise. He's a useful fucking idiot. What he always has been and will be until the moment he draws his last fucking breath. He's a fool. He's an idiot. He's a coward. And he is just about the dumbest motherfucker to ever exist in this country. He lies like he breathes, and he's just wrong all of the time he's not lying. So, you know, I guess for my mental health, really one of the best things I can do is just not listen to him talk. It is truly infuriating to go from Barack Obama, who is a skilled orator, to Donald Trump, who is the shittiest carnival barker who ever lived. And so it's difficult to watch that because I also hate hypocrisy and lies, and it just sort of rolls through hypocrisy and lies, and it gets rough. So I think there's something to be said for a tide turning. I think it's slow, but I do think it's coming. He is, like I said, diminished. He is a fool. And no one can really watch those displays in the Oval Office without understanding how easily manipulated he is, except for people who have already been manipulated by him. I want to point out that if Trump is so easily manipulated and he manipulates other people, those other people must be real fucking easy to manipulate. So, I know this was not particularly coherent, and it wasn't particularly long, but I felt the need to say something because I do want to clarify, even though I've been tired and I've been busy. The reason I haven't made as many videos is not because I'm afraid of this authoritarian wannabe dickhead or his friends. It's just because I've been tired. Because their gish gallop of bullshit does tire people out. But I'm not fucking afraid, and I'm not fucking done, and you shouldn't be either of those things either. This is America. We don't bow to tyrants. We overthrow them. And whether that's at the ballot box or on the fucking picket line, we'll do what needs to be done here. Because that's just what Americans do. And I believe it was Winston Churchill, and if I'm wrong, I will correct myself with text on the screen now. But I believe it was Winston Churchill who said, "You can always count on America to do the right thing only after it's exhausted all of the other options." So yeah, we get there. We just get there slow. But Trump has a way of speeding things up. So, I will see you next week. Not sure what I'll talk about, but we'll figure it out then, just like we figured it out now. And, whenever we get that stupid fucking Maha report on autism, I'll go through that and hate my life for a little bit. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of others, and keep fucking fighting. We're not fucking done.